Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the study session of June 13th. Carrie, will you do a roll call, please?
I will. Mayor Inesco,
Here?
Deputy Mayor Schmidt,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Here.
Councilmember Sherman,
Here.
Councilmember Bug.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Community and Economic Development Director Jay Hill has information for us about animal control and shelter options.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Appreciate being here tonight. For
Okay.
Okay.
Been-
Okay, so, should I start?
No, no.
Okay.
Everything's right.
Please continue. The slides are available. So there's no official no-kill shelter policy. It's not in our code. There's no council resolutions. I looked at everywhere I could to find if there was something to that effect. And while we've been operating under that, it would be really nice to either have like a resolution or a codified ordinance from the council. Either establishing that or establishing parameters around when that is appropriate or when there are exceptions to that and so on. Currently, we, if a dog is sick, dying, we'll provide euthanasia. But if there's nothing to say what happens if we're holding the dog for 3 to 6 months or 9 months or something like that. And it's a call. I don't want to be. I love dogs. Every time I go there, I want to talk to whoever's sitting there. I want my dog at home, but at the same time, like, we also have to be fiscally responsible. As I'm saying, if the shelter is open with 1 dog or 12 dogs, we have to have somebody there. If there's 0 dogs in there, we don't have to have our nighttime staff come by. We don't have to. But we've been pretty well occupied full or part-time in the last several months. And it's costing us more money because we have some long-term visitors. And so something to consider. And I know it's a humane decision, but it's also a fiscal decision. And it's one that I'm glad you folks are here to make.
Gee, thanks.
You're welcome. And then the last kind of major question about this is the police in town yard there and a long-term solution for that. So some of our long-term solutions for operations, whether we're farming it out or whether we have people coming borrowing space or having extra access to the building, there's some stuff stored there and access to that, and also the fact that that's sitting in kind of residential area next to a house. I don't know if y'all have been by there at all, but it could go somewhere else and be a little bit more attractive in the neighborhood. But where does it go is also a great question. So then going on to the discussions, so there's kind of some options in front of us here, and then I'll get to kind of suggestions around the options here soon. So we could contract for services out. We could have somebody else come in and do the work for us, run our shelter program, run our animal control program to whatever level of service we desire. I talked with Mason County Humane Society. They ran it past their board. They tried to come up with a proposal, and they were looking about $100,000, which is not much more than what we're actually paying for it right now. We talked with Mason County. Mason County has some interest in running an animal control program of their own, and possibly using our facility to do it. But they are in very, very, very preliminary discussions, and we need to make a decision probably sooner than they are making decisions. Contract for services in, so we could work with some of these existing organizations, as I mentioned, that we provide shelter space on a contract basis. We mentioned earlier, Mason County Humane Society, they want to foster a program, and sometimes they need holding space for the dogs. Sometimes adopted pet is at capacity and needs space to hold dogs. And so if we were to have some kind of contract for services where we're essentially holding beds for them, for a nightly fee or some kind of a retainer plus a nightly fee, something like that, we could enter into contracts with these organizations and at least have a little bit more revenue back to us. And then the last one is to raise our adoption fees for some of the more adoptable dogs. And looking at the other shelters and adoption agencies in the area, they'll charge way more for puppies, kittens, and small dogs, the dogs that are much more adoptable, and then have discounted rates, some even more than what we're charging for older dogs, bigger dogs, senior dogs, so on. So I'm just kind of going to the suggestions next. So we do need someone to do animal control, whether that is more of like a shelter lead technician or an actual animal control officer that's going out and handling these calls and cases throughout the city. Someone needs to handle that and needs to do that directly. I recommend that we also, if we're committed to hiring that person, that we'll have the capacity, that we start engaging in contracts for services with Mason County Humane Society and so on, that we have the ability to take animals for them in exchange for revenue. That we revise our adoption fee schedule. Currently, like I said, we charge $100 or $200 per animal, depending on if they're spayed or neutered. A lot of places are charging $500 for puppies under a year. We charge less than that, about $350 for adolescent dogs and $300 for small adult dogs, which are also highly adoptable.
Jay, to piggyback on that, we have veterinary fees for all the animals, correct? So we conduct a spay or neuter or something like that, so we have a cost associated. With that adoption fee right off the bat, not just housing the animal, but also those veterinary bills.
And we don't have any cat or kittens fees, which would be, kittens are a little bit more than an adult cat, but that's also just a recommendation. And then again, as I mentioned, I'm looking for council direction for a policy for the extended housing and care of animals. How long are we going to hold on to that? What are our alternatives if we can, or, and that's a policy direction for the city to make that decision. So that's my formal presentation. I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can. Mark and I have been born on the budget on this quite a bit. We see other opportunities for additional revenue. We, have a dedicated animal control officer to follow up on yearly licensing and so on. Perhaps we could raise additional revenues that way with the addition of adoption fees and so on. But a lot of it's speculative. It depends on how many dogs are coming in. It depends on what kinds of programs we're able to run, and the kind of person we get is able to, whether that's part-time or full-time. So
I think the only thing to make clear again is we are considering levels of service throughout the city right now. As we enter into the formulation of the 2024 budget and the consideration of the adoption of a supplemental 2023 budget. This program is not unlike any other service that the city provides and has to be considered on what level of service will be provided now and in the future. So as we make decisions leaving here, not decisions, but we have guidance leaving here tonight to bring forward to you at a later date. These could have ramifications on how we formulate a 2024 budget as well going forward. So we're interested in any and all options discussion tonight. And certainly willing to bring back some more information to you. But we do have a need. Jay is spending time during the day feeding dogs and cleaning kennels. I've mentioned about planning and strategic work that our department directors need to be doing, and that is not part of it. We need to address that in some way, in some manner here in the very near future, because we will fall further and further behind in that strategic planning process.
Is there, first question, I guess, is how can we increase the volunteer program, and can we maybe get help to get more volunteers and more involvement in the community? And this is one thing I'm going to disagree with my council member friend Joe. This is one thing I think we can save this year with bake sales and things like that. We're getting everyone involved, the whole community, getting involved to save the dogs. That's a universal thing. Everyone feels like Jay. It's like we all have dogs or very close to family pets, and I think there's a lot of willingness in the community by 99% of the community to step up and volunteer to help. I think that we should go towards that, have a really robust volunteer program. I'm on the side of, I think we should have a full-time dog catcher, and have, and we should be the center because we're in Mason County, we're the city, we're the only city in Mason County. I think we should be the hub. I think we should subcontract out and decrease the costs of it. But I think it should be more robust, and I think that will also ease some of the code enforcement as well, because it's animal control is part of the code enforcement, right? So, I mean, very minimal, but I'm just trying to plot the positives here because I'm trying to make sure that the care and the hours of dedication of all the folks that are volunteering now and that are there, almost, giving up their services for free, that they need support. Those dogs need support. Everyone in the community thinks that this is an important thing that the city should do. And if we're going to be a community this is something that we should have to keep our citizens and our pets and our families happy and safe. If there were a dog running around a community that was, kind of dangerous, what happens now? What's happening now? It's we call the police and maybe they show up, right? So I'm just thinking this is an important service, and it's not just inconvenient. It's not just a convenience thing. This is a serious, very serious issue. I know in some countries there are wild dog problems. It's not necessarily here, but maybe out in the country more and packs and coyotes and whatever, but this is something that we have a control of now, barely, we're holding on. But this is something that we need more help on doing, and they also have a feral cat problem as well, but there's a lot of things we can be doing that we should do more of, and I think we should go towards more services than less, but I understand what's going on, and I'm willing to come down and do some of the duties that you're doing, Jay, and start a volunteer program. And I've got friends who live on Pine Street that said, I'll come down there and help those dogs, and so I'm just saying that there is an appetite to help out. And there is an appetite for, that we should keep supporting at a minimum level and do the best we can to increase the volunteerism for this, for keeping this open. That's my guidance, and I'm very passionate about it.
The major cost isn't so much paying the people to work there. The major cost is the upkeep on the dogs. Shots, spayed and neutered.
That's all, it's about 60,000 goes to salary and benefits as currently budgeted, and about 20,000 goes to the operation.
Okay.
kinds of things.
All right.
So yeah, labor is definitely the major cost.
Almost 200.
It's almost always the
The
major
half
cost.
FTE,
Pardon?
if we take into account the half FTE, that 120, I mean. Almost
Okay.
100,000 of that is labor, so
Okay.
20,000 is actually cost, part of cost.
And that was based on how the position was previously classified. and
Right.
paid. There's opportunities for this classification and compensation,
Really,
just this position.
I just have a question. Maybe you have a better feel on our community and what they can afford. I understand that some communities can afford to charge $500 for puppies and things, but I'd be afraid that maybe those puppies are gonna sit there for more than 2 months because maybe Shelton doesn't have that budget. Do you feel like they do, that they can afford these prices?
Yes,
Based on the folks that we've talked to regionally, locally, whatever, I mean, even people within the building, when you're gonna talk about just the leadership, I mean, it's hard to find puppies to adopt right now. They're not, people have waited 9 months to find a puppy somewhere. They move faster.
I'm just afraid that, if we price them out, then they sit there longer and then you have them longer. So it's like, how do you balance that?
$5 on every water bill for everybody in the city. to pay for the animal shelter.
leave the water alone, Joe.
You can't tax it, you can't fee it. So if it's something that the public wants, then the public's gonna pay for it. Or, unfortunately, surplus and deal with the building, because we have another $75,000 of the things we had to repair on the facility. You said it leads, right?
30-ish.
New roof,
You,
upkeep,
pay
everything, and that's
HVAC.
ongoing costs, and that's a result of deferring maintenance.
What's the
because we
cost of the
got-
HVAC for that?
I don't know if we've got definitive costs. If you do a split unit, you can probably get into that under $10,000, depending on the, the room size and.
I did one for 6, so yeah,
Pardon me?
I did a pretty good size one for 6.
I do them every day for 2, but
Okay.
So maybe Jim should do it.
but we can't, we gotta.
Yeah, we have minimum wage for safety.
30 grand
Yeah.
for those, rooms are insane to me.
Well, the roof, the last bid we got was the budget formulation for 2023 for the roof replacement. That was about 14.
Mr. Mayor, we might have a question from the audience.
Not very big building, yeah.
Are we taking?
No,
Study sessions, study session.
I'm real big on volunteers. I think volunteer is a big thing in the community. It gets a lot done. For not a lot of money. Can some of those items, some of the, like the HVAC be put out to some of the service clubs to raise some money for something like that? I mean, we raised money for the basketball court.
Actually, and there was also Lions Club that led that project, not city staff. So we need to talk about how that happens. Do we have a volunteer coordinator? No. Do we have a fundraiser? No. Like I said, these are duties that I want to get out of the department director's hands. So they're actually strategically planning and running
It's
their
not the
department.
highest and best use of space. I mean,
Thank
that's
you, I
really what it
appreciate
is.
What
it.
if
So,
we-
so yes, those are great ideas. We can go down that road. We need to find a mechanism to do that. And you can't count on volunteers long-term. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know.
We've all been involved in volunteer projects
Yeah.
around here, and long-term efforts by volunteers. One project is fine, one fundraising effort is fine. long-term, it's a difficult prospect and who's ultimately holding the bag.
Can we, sorry, I gotta point at statistics here. I was a little shocked at the 2022-2023 stats. So is my roughly 7 to 8 dogs a month, roughly 5 to 6 complaints a month? Yeah, so to me, unfortunately, that does not rise to a level of being a high priority right now. And is there a proposal though out there for contracted services? Sounds like there might be, or there's interest.
Preliminary discussions, I said their interest. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm very interested in what those would be, and I would like to get them. But I'm leaning, without that information. I'm leaning towards surplus and get rid of the facility, and if there's somebody who's willing to move in there, then I'm willing to work a deal on that. To come in and offer the services and contract services out. But the costs of continuing I'm looking at it purely from an expenses perspective. Another building without a funding mechanism for it is another thing that we're gonna get caught. And then we're gonna get to a point too, where it's gonna be bad enough that we're gonna have to close it, right? And we're not gonna have, right? So bad long-term planning, however you want to chalk it up, but here's where we are today. Like you said, 30 to 50K or whatever the amount is, but having to be on the hook for that for the long term, I'm not too interested in it, but I am interested in proposals that balance that out. We love to hear it.
My question is, what were the numbers before the last year? Because the past few years, people just gave up calling. I want to tell you the truth. I talked to Mark about this. Some people are not in their heads people just gave up calling. So I think if you look back at stats in the past, we're gonna have way more calls and way more stuff that was done. But just right now, the past couple of years, people just gave up. And I'm one of those people, and I had my friends. Well, when there's a dog loose in the community, it's like we all in the community, like, let's go find that dog. And then we all, get on, but we stopped calling.
But I think this goes back to, this is not necessarily like a core function of city government, and there are people who have a heart for this and have a passion for this and do well at this. So I'm much more interested in looking at some sort of public-private partnership and exploring those opportunities. I think from a cost perspective, it makes a lot more sense for us. The dogs would get a better level of care. Hopefully we'd have a better adoption rate. As far as the adoption fees go, I think that raising them to that level, I don't think would impact our overall adoption, just based on like, when we got my dog Millie, right? She was a puppy, she was 8 weeks old, we got her to adopt a pet, we paid $450, and that was 4.5 years ago. People who want that dog are gonna get that dog, right? But you're right, there does become that balance for, okay, now we've paid more by having to keep them so much longer. So like, where is the line on that?
But you're getting a spayed, neutered, shotted up dog. You're getting hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of
Certain
value. in
veterinary
that.
services.
And we're not a poor town. So like people can afford things in Shelton.
And I also think that there's an opportunity when we talk about like dog licensing fees, we added the permanent licensing recently. I don't think that's something that we have tapped into. And because quite frankly, it's a cumbersome process right now to get your dog license with the city. And I think that is part of the reason we don't have, people don't know they need to have their dogs licensed, then it's difficult to do. And then we don't have any mechanism, it's not like your tabs where you get an email that says, hey, it's time to renew your license. So I think using community events as an outreach tool on that would be a really easy option. And maybe there's a way we could even have a voluntary, add an initial X amount of dollars to go towards, and whether it's a fund to address the services or whether it's just to offset costs. It's like when you get do your tabs, and do you want to get the Discover Pass? Do you want to add $5 more for the youth program? I don't think we should require people to do that, but I do think there's a function of, if we want this to happen, it has to pencil, and we're not at that place right now. So trying to be creative about how we kind of crowdfund some of that, and look at those public-private partnerships to makes a lot more sense.
Deidre, I'm gonna miss you.
I will add about the revenue. So we ran revenue from 19 to 22. The high was in 2019, $6,892 was taken in through licensing, adoption, and impound fees. And so anywhere from 68 down to 2022 is just over 3,000. So that's what's been offsetting our costs at its highest and kind of lowest for the last 4 years.
You said we're required by statute to provide some of these services. Which ones were those?
We're required to provide them only because we have clear animal control authority. If we were to, and this is like totally, I mean, if we just wanted to hands up and walk away from this particular program, we could remove it from our code as a responsibility and we're not required to provide it. It's required to be provided by counties for the RCW, but I didn't see anything that requires cities specifically to have animal control authority. Now, there's still animal control functions that need to be conducted that would have to be done by police, but we don't have to run the shelter, we don't have to operate it, we do.
Guess what would private look like? Because I know that I have come to you guys about private and there's been nothing brought back or talked about from it from there. What,
Yeah.
because I offered to potentially take over the building and deal with all of that, but it just died.
I think the animal control is a separate matter. Can a private entity bring animal control without the proper licensing, insurance requirements?
So, and with that, no, they have to be an animal control authority, so only a humane society or a municipal government can do that in the city or joint powers.
Just to be clear, they can only do the animal control aspect, such as going out to and fetching an animal, but then it could be dropped to the private shelter.
Right, and then private shelters have a different period for stray holds, so it's 30 days instead of 3. So as a private entity, you would, if somebody brought in a stray, you would have to hold it for a whole month before you could adopt it out. You can make all the reasonable attempts to, locate the owner. It's a very different.
Gotcha.
Is it possible to do some sort of either RFP or even just a roundtable with our folks that are in this space to talk about what that might look like? Because again, this is not the city's like bread and butter. This is not what we do day in and day out. And it sounds like you guys have done an incredible job of reaching out and doing a lot of the research, but as far as brainstorming about what that looks like and what we're actually asking for, I don't know if we know what that is yet. Is that fair?
We haven't been told specifically what we're asking for. It's mostly been, as the discussions I had with Mason County Humane Society, for example, I went and said, hey, if you were to run our shelter and provide animal control for us, how much would that cost? And we told them what it was costing us, and they went and ran their numbers and came back and said, yeah, it's probably going to be about the same for us. And so, we're not gaining in efficiency. We would be on the contractor services to do that, and then lose all of the control. It becomes more difficult for us to manage. And then there's the question, if they're the ones running it, we're paying for the contractor services, do we still collect the adoption revenue? How does that, I'm sure it could all be worked out contractually, but we cede a lot of our ability to maintain the programs in the way we want. As you were just mentioning, if we want to start involving volunteers and soliciting donations and trying to bring the community in, if we have handed that off to an entity and paid them to do that, that's their responsibility at that point. It would be difficult for us to try to manage all of that programming if it's not our program to manage. We handed that off.
If you handed it off, would they be using the building that's there now?
In the discussions that we've had with the Humane Society and with Mason County proper, both have been interested in the facility. It was purpose built for it. Before.
I'm not interested in leasing it. They can have it.
Yeah.
Surplus it.
Yeah,
Sell it
over
for $1,
for a
whatever
dollar.
the
You can't
legal-
sell it. It's attached to that whole parcel.
Actually,
We can figure that
I
out.
think we figured that out.
Oh, did you figure that out?
Sorry, yeah,
Okay.
we may-
Yeah.
That might not have been the case before. I assumed it was under the parcel with the entire shop, that was in the water utility. But I think Jay found out that it was.
It's
on a
general
separate parcel.
fund.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That,
The ownership of the building, the liability attached to that never goes away. Right? I mean, no different than any of our infrastructure, this building, anything, even if you lease it, you still have a liability long term on that. So.
but if you sell it
Consider.
for $1. I mean, it's
Or
gone.
whatever
It's out,
negotiated
yeah,
was.
it's out of our hands. Still,
As
Right.
long as the city does not have ownership, correct?
right.
How many dogs do we take? Do we impound on the street and people come and get them?
how many
Yeah.
in a year?
Yeah.
I don't, how's that exact?
I mean, what are we charging for that?
Um,
You pick up a dog up on the railroad and
There's a
bring him in.
$50 release. fee.
Yeah.
Like that.
Does it matter how long they are there for that? No, it's just 50 long.
I mean, well, maybe we should raise the release fee and then a daily charge if they
I'm
don't.
just
take
afraid
it.
they will come there.
And then we-
We already have surrenders, you know, people drop their dogs out there, tie them to the fence, throw them over the fence.
Hang them from the.
It's, yeah, and
Oh.
there is, and if they do that in person, then we have a surrender
Oh, I
fee of
see.
$40, right? It's,
We do get quite a few, of just the. last, yeah, that's what I reason.
and that becomes a burden on our entire constituency.
Can we have a little bit more discussion with Mason County before we get into nuts and bolts in this?
We. Mars.
On what?
I mean, them taking it over. Sounds like they're
There's a
interested.
proposal from the county to take it over?
There's not a proposal at this point.
There's no proposal.
There,
so
there,
like, yeah.
there is interest because they want to start animal control throughout the county. Obviously, the building is what? A benefit to anybody starting animal control service. Long term, we have to consider whether that is the right location and facility. If there is a residence next door, there's a school next door. If that grows and we don't have control over that as well, how do we maintain and manage how that
The facility
How-
grows?
But it's been that facility
the
since
function,
before.
the function grows, right? Yeah, our population grows,
Becomes
right?
busier.
So it could be more impactful, I should say.
Okay.
So we just have to consider that. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I just think that's a consideration if we are ceding control of that facility.
And the discussions, as far as I understand, and including the ones that I've had. With the means to go back to 6 months now. We haven't had any formal proposals. But to do this, after 6 months.
The county's working on some costs associated with, I was asked for some costs today. Like we talked about.
Yeah.
Here.
The county takes over. The county takes over, are they gonna get more exotic animals like horses and goats and other things in there? Just saying,
I don't think they'd have room to house it.
It's not really room for anything. But
just because that's what you deal with more of the country, on the countryside.
And if you do, just not to lose sight, if we do get rid of, if we dispose, lease, whatever, there's police evidence and policing now that needs to find another home, and there's another cost associated with that, where we're putting cars and records, things like that are stored on site. So as long as we still have the building, becomes less of a problem. Long term, it would be nice to find a new home for all that stuff anyway, which is the whole site for animal control. But if we want to get rid of it, we have to find another home.
Is there any proposed spots for the impound yard that you're thinking about?
We are moving and purchasing a container and moving it out to the wastewater treatment plant very soon for a vehicle that was involved in the most recent homicide, and that vehicle has to be kept potentially forever. Because of the fuels processes and everything, so, yeah, we have one other vehicle that's being stored in a container right now, and that just compounds as the city grows and our needs, so. That was a general fund need that will be placed in the CIP soon. I don't think it's been addressed up to this point.
Why do we have to have that? That's a capital crime.
Everything goes to C Street.
Well,
Go
C
through
Street,
the county.
also, Joe, the other one we talked about is the public works lay down yard. That area underneath the
Yeah.
power lines, we can't do anything with
Is that
it,
correct?
own it, because there's finite space for this water treatment plant. I mean, there just is, and it's
Correct.
not intended for that.
Exactly.
Why does this one seem like an easy one? What's the, what do we?
Well, because it's
what do we
because
work
of
on?
evidence that needs to be controlled and maintained. If we just
Right.
put it out at C Street, for example, and
Right.
people go out there and start
Okay, there you go.
shooting.
There you
and-
go. All right, sorry.
Yeah,
I was, where's the gotcha in this one?
Yeah,
Here, like,
yeah,
it's not an
it's-
impound yard, it's like evidence storage.
Evidence storage.
Long cure
And
plate.
some of it is
storage.
very long.
Okay.
Correct as well, so.
Why do we have to keep the car in the city? That's a capital crime. It's the county do that.
That's our crime. Okay.
And the county has an impound now, and they're holding it until we have a vessel to maintain that long term.
So they keep the evidence even forever?
So,
Until it's no longer. Playing there.
Oh, okay.
So.
That's normal,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So I hear the Humane Society one doesn't sound like it makes sense necessarily, because it keeps us right where we're at, but we lose all control financially. Mason County hasn't actually given a proposal. And then we don't know how to move forward with a private proposal.
We could try to move forward with a private proposal, if that was the flavor of the council. There's a lot of logistical issues with. An entity, my preference would be to be. An animal control authority for RCW that actually digs, they're vested with a little bit more power. And there's different ways that could be created, and humane societies can be animal control authorities, so. If it was to be a private entity, it's the best way to go. It could be an absolutely private entity like Adopt a Pet or whatnot. But then there's a lot more restrictions on how things are handled and whatnot that. They can all be worked out, but some of them could be problematic and legally difficult. City, we're handing off a dog and then the dog gets adopted out before the 30 days has elapsed, like. City had liability for that, and something comes back at day 29, where's my dog? We literally just had this happen with one of our dogs that he had been at the shelter for quite a while, and out of the blue, we get a call from Tennessee or North Carolina or something saying, hey, I have a dog. And then they ended up surrendering it anyway. So, but right as we were about to adopt it out, it's full the adoption, and then eventually we got it forever home. But there's a real liability there.
Understood. Beyond the liability, I mean, the option is potentially kind of a cross between the two. The actual shelters run private, and then we have an animal control person that definitely offsets the cost. Because now we're not dealing with the cost of housing, we're just dealing with the cost of somebody actually
And the animal control person could be a cop.
taking animals,
Correct.
dealing with animals.
The police can perform animal control.
So-
They do now.
I mean, I'm just throwing
Yeah.
ideas, because to me, like I said, the Humane Society doesn't sound like it makes sense, because it keeps us financially the same, but we lose all control. So what's the point of that?
Mhm.
And then we don't really have anything from the county. So,
But also, I mean, if you're kind of hearing the costs, I mean, it's about $100,000 minimum to fund that. So if you.
Understood,
think
but
that
I
a
mean-
private entity can pull that off here.
Sustainable.
Donations. I mean, yeah.
but
There's
private
not
entities
much
also
of it.
don't incur the same cost as a city, just like we're saying, if a private entity went in there and was doing the repairs, that $30,000 in repairs goes down to 12. A private entity decides that they're going to do grooming and dog boarding out of there as well, and still take on animals, because now they have a for-profit aspect of it. There's,
And here we go.
And-
So.
Well, this is what I
here's where
proposed,
it becomes
and-
really difficult. to
Yeah.
start Talking about.
And the
because that
private
whole zone
entity,
over there,
the private
all that.
entity can raise funds.
and raise
through
funds,
fundraisers.
do,
And thank you.
yeah, no,
Deputy Mayor,
absolutely.
For bringing that up, like, it's in a neighborhood residential zone. It's not, it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. If we allow a private business to expand over there, there's also some other issues with.
Gotcha.
Where it is, so
Yeah.
just.
So they move up to like Olympic Highway or something, or, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that
Well,
works.
the building
right?
is the biggest value to a private entity,
I know.
because you have a building that was built
Mhm.
to do this, so I mean, that's where the
That's
value
That's
of
my
that comes in.
partnership with this whole thing is if we can cut a deal with the building, we get out from underneath the building and the responsibilities of that. And then if they've got a formidable program and they can run throughout there and. And
let
then
me
and the
be
control
clear.
authority being law enforcement, because essentially I'll be blunt. This is what we're doing to preserve public safety, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's how bad the situation is, right? So.
Yeah.
Willing to,
And I apologize if there's a proposal of some sort. I know we talked briefly, but I don't know about a formal proposal or an outline or anything like that. There hasn't been one in front of us, so we certainly would be happy to have more of those discussions.
Understood.
Yeah,
But I was given misinformation, not because of anyone's fault, but
Sure.
I was told you can't buy the lot, it has to stay a part of it. I was told, so like,
Sure.
and then I was just kind of told that, well. So no big thing, there wasn't the ability to give a formal proposal because it didn't have the ability to do that, because I didn't have the information needed.
yeah,
But
we have some
so,
responsibility, you being a city council member and an
Fully-
employee as well, so.
fully
Yes, I
understand, only
appreciate
for a
that.
few more months, but like,
So.
but
Would it trigger anything, like if we were to sell the property, let's say if we surplus it, we sell it. As Jim's pointed out, that's the value is structure. If we sell it, then does the new code go into effect? And I mean, as long as there's no change of use, it should be.
it's just
You
not.
can't
Correct.
intensify the use. You can be a legal non-conforming use, but you cannot intensify that use.
So if somebody wanted to turn the impound yard into an additional kennel outdoor space and, start expanding facilities, having people dropping off dogs for grooming and care and all this other kind of stuff.
Outside of the city.
Yep, definitely would trigger all of the other. things
Totally,
along
totally
with
get
that
it.
too.
Yeah.
There'd be frontage improvement requirements, because now you're operating a commercial business, things like that. So,
Well,
I mean, we have, unless it was a registered nonprofit, I mean, like, there's a lot of things to consider, but definitely the non-conforming space is a matter.
can we do a RFPs, request for proposal to see if anybody's interested in taking it over? At this point, we could use our police to pick up the animals and then have a private person run the shelter at their, their expense, their fees, whatever they want to charge, that's, for that, I mean, at this point, we could pick, the cops could pick up the animals and then take them to the shelter and somebody else runs that shelter.
We, if you can say to direct to that, we started talking about that in January, February earlier this year. And so I started reaching out to different entities to see if they would propose and what they would propose and whatnot, because you can craft an RFP, hearing what other people have as ideas for the services they can provide, and if they can do it for a certain amount, like, is the building necessary, or can you do it without the building? Could they put this up in Belfair, and we just sell the building entirely for, somebody knock it down and turn it into a house, whatever. Like, we looked at a lot of different options, talking to different people to see who had the capacity to bring this on. And that's where we ended up. So we could issue an RFP and see who's out there. Maybe we'll get, someone that we haven't talked to. But I mean, every RFP I've ever flown, I've had a short list of people that I reached out to that I knew were already interested in something. That's usually where you're getting applies, but I guess willing
People
to do
are interested parties have probably
They've been
already
contacted.
expressed interest at this point, but
But this wouldn't be technically an RFP, because we don't have the idea of what we want the program to look like. We're asking for, pitch us a program. Animal control program, right? So it's not an RFP.
Well, it's a request for proposal for animal shelter and animal control services. And so they can say, we would like to do this for, sell us the building for $1 and we'll, for $100,000, we'll do all your animal control and take care of all your animals. And so it's a proposal for the operation.
Well, I'm not thinking we pay them. I'm thinking that they charge the fees for the adoption, they charge the fees for the pickups and the releases and all that stuff that we just bring in the dogs to them, to a private.
And that's where I worry about that being out of control. That's a control piece that we worrisome.
And also, as I know private industry and nonprofits can do it for a little less money than we can, but not for the volumes and the revenues that we're talking versus the actual cost of operating.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
This
They
is not
would,
a
they would
profitable
do,
venture.
what I'm saying, it'd be like a business plan. They would have a business plan of what works for them if they think they can actually do it. And, so.
If animal control is under the police department, will levies cover animal control?
PD
Like
is
if we
fully
get-
funded out of general fund at this point,
Oh,
and the public safety sales.
public safety safe tax be used for this.
Yeah.
But again, I go back to your numbers.
Yeah, okay.
So it's 5 complaints a month. 7 dogs a month. Roughly.
But we're still gonna have,
Ah,
but we're still gonna have to, no matter what, pick up dangerous dogs. If we have a dog that's
What I'm saying.
That's all
chasing
part of it. Isn't
kids
that all
down
part
the
of that
street, we have to take
number?
that dog. So regardless, we're gonna have to do something with dangerous animals,
That service will need to be provided in the city, right?
no matter what.
And that's a first responder, law enforcement kind of a call, right?
I'm just saying, take it out and go on development, put it back in public safety, and then let's use public safety funds, but I don't know. We got $200,000 for events over here, for public safety, so let's get some money for it over there, let's ask our representatives.
What
Go to
did
the
you
state
say,
and get
James?
some money like they did for the police department. I'm just saying,
But right now, public safety is being paid out of general fund, and that's the fund that is completely distressed at this moment, so we need to be looking at both short-term and long-term solutions for that.
Anything that we don't put a utility bill out for. Is strapped 7 figures. So. And we're working on it at $100,000 at a time. So
Right.
I'm not being an asshole here, but
well, I'm just saying we can recode.
we've been
stuff.
kicking the can for the last 7 years. It's like
We have-
we're at.
That's 29 years, we haven't done
You know,
anything.
unfortunately, these are the
But
situations.
we can get more money from public safety generally in the future. I mean, if you go to a levy and. I'm
So-
right,
If I may, I'm hearing, we're kind of bouncing back and forth, but to come back to the central issue. If we retain animal control services, then there's other things we need to talk about, the fee schedule, the housing care of animals. If we're not gonna keep that, we don't need to go through the work of amending the fee schedule on something we're going to not necessarily, because that may be an entirely different kind of program very soon. So I'm hearing about like half of the council seems to be in favor of getting rid of it.
I
To
think
another
the
entity.
proposals from, there's folks that obviously have some thoughts, and I wanna get whatever those are memorialized so we can review that. So,
I'm willing
and
to
whatever
have
from the
that.
county.
I
If
think I've
there's
heard
something
that
from the
from
county and
The
votes. that's
mayor,
something.
I've heard that from Councilmember Bud, correct?
Correct.
Is that?
I think
I
so.
heard here, Councilmember Sherman?
If there's a better entity to do this, I want them to do that.
And maintain
Well,
the service.
And I think where she's going is, if we can't really fund this well enough to perform a good level of service, then we need to find somebody who can figure that out, or make the tough decision and not do it. Because-
Then I'd like to make sure there's a no-kill policy forever. And then we'll negotiate from there.
I like the
If
idea
we
of,
pass it off, I'm just saying.
Well, those are fees applied to the city.
Yeah.
Right, if we take a dog to a shelter that's run by a private organization, most likely.
And I
that
probably just hurt the
organization's
chances
gonna-
of us keeping
that
it, but I'd
organization's
like to
gonna-
make sure the
yeah.
organization has a no-kill policy.
Understood, that organization's gonna charge the city, right, for services?
I'm saying if we're gonna let it go, there's a price to pay. If we're gonna, I think this is an essential city service.
Okay. Yeah, understood. Yeah, we just need to develop a cost associated with those animals that are in, and maybe there isn't, maybe we get an RFP that says, hey, we'll absorb all those costs for any animal that's
That's what I'm
collected in the
saying.
city, great, but.
Bring it.
And so,
Yeah.
Not being able to monetize that location makes that an impossibility, though.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
it's that weird things. But like I said, the whole value of that building, to me, is the fact that it's a turnkey building. That can utilize that, but not being able to expand into that yard, not being able to actually generate revenue other than through the minuscule fees that you're gonna get. Because even at those, I mean, $300, $400, $500 for a pet isn't an outrageous amount. I mean, I know people that spend thousands of dollars on animals. So but that's the hard part, is that now we've shackled somebody that wants that building. Of course, because of zoning and things, not because of choice, but
well, and I mean, the adjacent uses too, it's a, predominantly residential neighborhood. We do have a shop there at the end.
And we're
I guess how you look at it.
our long-term plans are to move out, right? We don't wanna be down there anymore. We're already
Absolutely.
telling the public, get out of there, right?
we're facing the
Yeah,
same
we're
issue.
explaining all the geotechnical issues and blah, 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 and, so, yeah, I mean. I would love to hear what's out there in terms of ideas on this. Purely looking at this from the economics, it does not make sense to continue to do this. It just doesn't pencil. And putting this above other public safety needs is very difficult for me to weigh out right now.
So back to proposal, 1 second. I think I'm hearing the consensus, at least if
Yeah.
not unanimous.
Yeah.
Direction
Yeah.
at least that we.
handing it off to someone.
That we,
else.
well, we want to seek proposals, right?
seek
And then
proposals.
we have an option.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have options to provide to the council for further consideration at that point.
In the interim, I wouldn't mind raising some of these fees just in the interim, so in case, we're still gonna be providing the service, we still have. We're still feeding dogs, we're still going to the vet, so in the interim, until we figure out a long-term solution, I wouldn't mind if we look at the fee schedule or we raise the fee, so.
And in interim, also, just like you said, maybe we can get more volunteers in the meantime while we're pushing this ball down the road.
In a perfect world, let's say that we put out the RFP tomorrow and we find the perfect proposal next month, and we vote on it and we move forward. The likelihood of that going into effect anything before the beginning of the calendar year is, I would say, fairly non-existent, right? So are we looking at hiring a half-time person through the end of the year that's going to be volunteer coordinator / shelter tech? Like, what does that look like? Because in interim, we still have a responsibility to provide those services. And I think there's a huge opportunity to, rally volunteers and other resources, but there needs to be someone that city staff is dedicating to that project, to that program. And that is not Jay. I mean, Jay, you're a fabulous person, but that is not what you were hired to do. And so looking at what our through the calendar year plan looks like is kind of, for me, the next question.
We talked about that, and that's exactly what we would need to do. We need to put some more resources at this to maintain any service level, whether there's 2 dogs in there, as Jay mentioned, or 10. We have to be there certain hours a day. We have work that has to be done. We have adoption services that we have to coordinate,
Pet license.
licensing and all of those things that really are kind of dropping off right now. So we need to perform those, but we need to set up our timeline here with a reasonable goal of bringing this to resolution.
And it sounds like maybe the council would be amenable to having the RFPs designed to have a start date of like January 1st or January 2nd, whatever. 2024.
They can start.
Yeah, I'd love them to start anytime.
Well,
Understood.
if my effort is to prepare like schedule updates and things like that, or my effort is to, I mean, I'm supposed to start a comp plan here very
Yeah.
soon.
I want to really highlight the importance of where we need Jay's skill set. And there's a lot of federal funds at stake that would very much help us dig out of some long-term economic distress and and we need our talented staff on that, and very much so. So
We also need to plan. We also need to plan appropriately. If we are hiring somebody, it's hard to hire somebody and tell them they might not have a job in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, right?
Yeah.
We need to give a reasonable horizon on what the timeline is here.
Well, and also, Mark, if you hire someone, you've got people that are getting laid off here.
Well, we have
I
a
mean,
budget, we have an impact to the general fund to do that. We are budgeted this year. We didn't eliminate that in the supplemental budget, the 2023 supplemental budget. We didn't eliminate that because we didn't have a decision. We've had a little bit of savings over the course of the last few weeks. Basically for not having these positions filled, we've had to increase those part-time employees a bit, so that's offset as well. So this will be an impact in 2024 at this point. Yes, if you don't realize any savings in 23, it means more reductions in 24 at this point.
We mentioned back, we were talking a few minutes ago about volunteer people and committees, or I don't think we mentioned committees. Is there a possibility, instead of putting city staff on a group to figure out this out with you, would it be a possibility to put in citizens to work with you to figure this out?
For like evaluating RFPs or.
Or just anything that, is that a possibility?
We need to maintain impartiality. And if there's citizens that truly have a real interest in serving, sometimes they couldn't be a potential respondent to that RFP. So we'd have to separate that in some sense and communicate that fully. We also have the timelines of different parties outside the city that sometimes slows things down, frankly. So we have to consider that at the same time, but.
Can I make a suggestion for the flavor of the council here? So if we were to hire a full-time person to manage the shelter, manage the shelter tax, manage the volunteers, handle all that stuff on a limited 6-month duration till the end of the year, or 5 months, whatever it takes to, hire and keep this person doing the work. And just a limited duration position that ends at the end of the year. We have the RFPs begin the process now. It's going to take a while to fly. I want to get responses to review, evaluate subcontracts, so on and so on. You have that scheduled for the end of the year as well. So the decision, we can take some temporary steps to raise revenue and whatnot, but that's all interim until we have somebody else manage it. That way I can at least get somebody doing that day-to-day work and get the service that we need taken care of. We defer the maintenance for the most part. There's a fence repair that has to happen. We're working on that now, but like there's a few things we can defer the rest of the maintenance, and then so we'll raise the fees, defer the maintenance, hire a limited term animal control officer, and then begin RFPs to see what other people are willing to provide. And then at the end of that, you know, the RFPs that we receive are not suitable, they're gonna cost us more, we're not gonna get the level of service we need, ever, we're back to the drawing board for what we can next year, but at least we've had an interim plan for this year and try. So
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I definitely, I appreciate the desire to get the request for proposals. To be completely frank, I've had the conversations, I've tried reaching out to other organizations very far away. To see if they can take this on as part of their organization. It's just not worked out.
So what do other cities do? Are there private organizations in cities or are all the dog shelters run by cities?
They're mostly run by some kind of city, county, animal control authority, something like that. There's not a lot of private like shelters and animal control functions. There are private like pet adoption agencies. We have a couple of them.
Right.
Kitten rescue. Yeah. I mean, they exist, but they're not the animal control authority. They don't run the shelter per se. Mason County Humane Society kind of does up in Belfair, one part of the county. They have a 100% foster program. And they have somebody who coordinates all of their volunteers and they have vets on staff. They have they're a larger program. And you know, so everybody does it a little differently, but and like in Olympia, it's joint animal services between the cities over there. So they combined to do that. And something like that here would make a lot of sense. It's, you know, it's just us in the county.
Where does the money come in for Belfair to do what they do?
Oh, for the Humane Society.
It's the
They have
Humane Society that does it.
fundraisers,
Okay.
their adoption costs, some other things. They proposed a contract for services with Mason County that went nowhere.
Yeah.
It's $200,000, I think is what I heard.
I guess I just keep coming back to, you know, Eric and I know Deidre as well, but you know, we sat, listened to preliminary information shared from the Financial Sustainability Task Force. And by 2030, the city is out of money in the general fund, right? Even if we raise sales tax above 10% and we make considerable cuts to our workforce, doesn't matter. This can has been kicked for decades. We haven't addressed the general fund shortfall. Every year we've approved the budget, even when Jeff Knighton was here, Bob Jean scared him away because he was too scary about the budget situation. But then in reality, he was actually right. And now we have to own up to that. Again, these are difficult decisions to make. And it's not easy and it sucks to be in this position, frankly, and to be the council that's going to have to make a cut. Because again, we're in a position now where we're making considerable staffing decisions in 2024. Your point was very well taken. We can finish this year out maybe with some good ideas and we can level this playing a little bit. 2024, 2025, 2030 is too short of a term that these types of $100,000 fixes are going to solve it. And it's just, yeah, and that's where I'm getting back to Jay. Your talents, Mark, right? Getting a leadership team established and everything, like we need to go after, and we need to talk about long-term development strategies. We need to talk about annexation. We need to talk about the strategies of attracting residential construction, or settle with the fact that we're going to be upside down in 7 or less years. That's the stark reality. So, I mean, I hate to sound heartless about this, but bigger problems.
Any other questions?
I think we have consensus then, Mayor.
Short term, stopgap, and long.
And Jay, thank you for using your time and taking care of the animals. Thank everybody that's out there that's
Really,
volunteered.
it's been we for years, we've had night and weekend help and they have been stepping so hard on.
This is our last kick
Yeah.
of the can, so
We
I'm
need to do
just
something
saying,
to recognize that.
we need to recognize the efforts that have been going on and if this is the ending, that's gonna end in a few months, so let's celebrate our last 6 months and let's maybe get some momentum that this doesn't happen again, but yeah.
All right. Does council have any items for discussion?
I do, I have some questions. I'm just wondering, and we're totally changing topics here. Sometimes the food buses will come in and they'll hand out food different places in the community. I didn't know, do they need a permit to do that? How does that work exactly?
They are not permitted in any way that I know of, that they're not selling food and vending food for sale, like our food trucks. Those are permitted under our zoning code. But a social service type activity,
Right.
as far as I know.
Like the one that, out at the Y parking lot occasionally is out here.
Sometimes it's up at Fred Meyer parking or up there at that parking.
There's
Yeah.
a couple
Yeah,
different
there's-
ones and they're different places. They're like Bank of America up there by Dollar Tree,
Yeah, right.
sometimes.
Right.
Over to the mill shed lot.
Yeah, they're all over and I just don't know if there's any rules or regulations or if there are permits or anything. Do they have food handlers permits? Do they have to get a permit to do that?
They're not
Because-
serving hot food, they're just, they're.
They're handing
serving
out
grocery.
bread and
No, there's
I've
no.
bags
I've
of
seen a little
potatoes.
bit of both. I've seen them give packaged food items, like looks like maybe there's soup
Yeah.
or something in it. And I've also seen them hand out loaves of bread. And I'm just curious if we have any rules or regulations on that, if they require permits, do they get permission from the property owners? I'm just kind of lost.
They
there.
should have permission from the property, owners, absolutely, it's trespassing.
That's a civil issue.
Right.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
the other question.
The other question about the permitting, we don't have anything in our code that would cover that. It's the food trucks are serving hot food. They're licensed by the health department. They're a restaurant. These other, it's the delivery service essentially. If you compare it to something else. Yeah, is there a concern of their operation or?
I'd be curious to maybe push for them to get a permit, so we know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be, because they do draw a considerable amount of people to certain areas at certain times. And it would be kind of nice if we knew when to expect the rush of people. You've got pedestrians and all sorts of things. And sometimes you're drawing them to neighborhoods. So I would think it'd be something we should consider as maybe making it a permit. And maybe it's a simple permit, maybe it's a $10 permit, maybe just so that we have some control over it. And secondly, I'd be curious to see, probably not allowed to do this, but how many people they're serving at a time, because I think that would help the community have an idea of what we're really up against.
Handler's permit, I think is very important, especially.
But if they're just handing out bread, then that.
Right.
The city doesn't regulate food handlers permits.
Right, that's
South
the
of Mason County,
So-
we assure that a food truck has that permitting process when they
Right.
go through their business license.
Right,
Permit,
streamline business.
But in this case, this wouldn't trigger a business license,
And
so.
also, if they're on private property, I wonder, can you dictate what they're doing there? I can hand out all the food I want from my front porch.
Correct.
I can hand out Halloween candy, I can hand out, so like,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
not a
know.
commercial concern. We don't have any taxes or revenue to worry about loss from. I mean, the only thing really is if there is an impact of traffic.
Pedestrian safety.
Yeah.
Exactly, pot closed up in a parking lot.
Well,
They
and
may or
then
may not have permission.
and there's also the fact that a lot of times people take the food and then they just throw it on the sidewalks in the street and then we're cleaning it up later too. And then you're dealing with that in those areas and you can almost tell, oh, the food truck was here today. Now I'm picking up loaves of bread and, things of cabbage off of the ground.
I love donut
So-
cake.
So, bowling for cabbage is always fun, but, so I would be interested in something like that. For a little bit of control over that.
I mean, do we have the capacity or, to track, what does that look like for staffing? Or is it a matter of reaching out with, hey, service providers, community helpers, here's the expectation of behavior, is that more the conversation? Maybe that doesn't come from the city, maybe that comes from, more of the community, looking at the folks that are providing those services, because I hear your concern as far as the trash left behind, and I get complaints in my office. Why is somebody in the such and such parking lot? Because people think that if it's open, it's available, and don't realize it's necessarily private property. I don't know that that's the city's role, and I don't know that I'd be interested in us getting into permitting that, but I hear your concerns. Just trying to think about where that might best live.
And if I may also add, every permit has a cost for staff time, review approval, technology fees that get charged, credit card fees that get charged, all that kind of stuff. Then there's finance, it has a cost, and so a $10 permit doesn't.
Okay, so you make it enough to cover that, and then maybe that helps us.
Do we know who they are? Where they're,
It's the
I don't
same.
get 70 ministries.
okay.
It tends to be the same.
Crazy Health
Maybe we
Ministries
could
does
just
one too.
reach out to a few of these providers and talk to them and have a conversation before we begin, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just try to start there before we do a permit per se. Just have a conversation about expectations.
During COVID, the monobus was a lot of places, like at the parking lot of Fred Meyer and up at the YMCA, and there are a lot of people that use those services. So my concern would be the quality of food that comes out of there, because a lot of them are like expired milk, bananas that are ready to be banana bread, or a couple of days past, but ready to be banana bread. So that would be my concern. And then but there are a lot of people that are being helped by that. And I just wanted, that got a lot of people through COVID. So I don't know how much regulation we need for someone like Councilor Vogt said, like, it's my private property, I'm giving away food.
I don't know
So
how much we can have,
how much can we?
more than need, because it's getting into an odd area. And
Not
then
sure
we're
why
probably
they're
talking about a nonprofit handing out food, like,
We can maybe zone place where there's a giveaway like spot. I don't know.
I'm not sure why they're not working with the food bank.
Yeah.
Why they're double.
Wait a minute.
I mean, that'd be considered a social service, probably the best description, maybe within our zoning code, which is allowed almost anywhere.
yeah.
Outside the NR office, if I remember right.
We can't.
Yeah, you can't refine your code so much, right? Well, certain circumstances and certain uses. right?
There's hard perception with that move as well.
Yeah.
Like,
And if we start
Well, the
charging,
perception is we're targeting nonprofits that are helping.
that are distributing food to people in need, so I mean,
We're regulating them out of business. is the
yes,
Perception.
Well, let's take that up to the 10,000 foot level. We're talking about what we have capacity as a city to do right now, what our level of service is on all of these programs. So I don't know, introducing new things. If we can find an alternative to address those issues. And I think to Sharon's point, there are some things to be worked through, but hopefully that's something that we can
And-
resolve in some other way without us having to create more.
I agree with the starts of the conversation.
Yeah, we just didn't know if there was anything.
I'll reach out to the providers and just
Fair
express that
question.
there's been some concern
And I-
and see. if-
Traffic and pedestrian safety, and then if they're able to provide, our food trucks require them to have a garbage can.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
something like a garbage can on site, or you patrol within a certain area, or, we have a cooperative conversation
That could be
about how
fine.
that could,
Yeah.
how that could benefit, be mutually beneficial.
Frankly, I don't think they actually have permission from the property owners to be there.
Often they do not.
So.
Yeah.
That may resolve itself if that's the issue. I don't think they actually have permission.
But that comes down to now we've got to get a hold of that property owner to make sure that they're not okay with it.
I know at least one of them that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In the BOA, the properties for sale right now, it's up for auction.
I would think that if I owned a piece of property, unless I lived out of town or in another state, couldn't keep an eye on it, but if I owned a piece of property. I would think I would know if there was a vehicle sitting on my property without.
But a lot of them
permission.
don't live here, they just own the
Right.
property.
Yeah,
That'd be nice if we had a lot of property owners that were more engaged with their properties they own
Mhm.
in
yeah,
our community, right? That isn't always the case, and sometimes that takes some enforcement, the code enforcement officer that would address those in certain instances.
And you're looking at it right now.
Yeah,
And that's one of those days.
that's right.
Are we moving on from that one?
All right. That is-
Is that consensus of the council? We'll reach out, we'll
Yeah.
perform some outreach, provide some guidance, if you will,
Yeah,
about some of the concerns raised.
Remind them about trespassing
Yeah.
issues and
Yeah.
property.
maybe they can just work with the food bank. We've already got a
Yeah.
food bank downtown. I don't know why they just don't.
Everybody doesn't always play well together, though.
Finding that out in the
Yeah.
nonprofit.
Yes, it's a bunch of people going for the same money.
Exactly.
So it's a competitive field. I did have a comment about proclamations. I guess I didn't fully understand the way that we work proclamations. Because we didn't really ever talk about it. I understand that it was on our schedule for quite some time. I 100% missed it. But just. Could it be explained to me exactly how they work? There's just the 2-second overview.
I don't know if I can quote verbatim the council protocol manual, but essentially, staff puts forward agenda items, including proclamations, and then it is reviewed by the committee, which is city clerk, city manager. Then we review it with the mayor prior to prior to, the meetings. Proclamations, I have directed the clerk to carry over proclamations on the looking ahead that were previous proclamations from the year before.
Okay.
So they don't, much like most agenda items, they're not, unless you are asking specifically for a briefing.
Okay.
We're not specifically talking about those agenda items. You're seeing those on the looking ahead and then at the briefing or the agenda, the
Okay.
meeting that they occur. So
Alright.
we can certainly add those to a discussion point of some sort, or I can be more specific on the looking ahead. At a
And I
meeting.
take full accountability
Yeah,
for my lack of looking at that. It was 100% my fault. But like, if we have disagreements on them, does it not matter because it gets put forward and the mayor just gets to sign it? So we all just follow that proclamation regardless, but we get to say, I don't like it, but it's gonna happen because he signed it. Is that how that works?
Currently,
Currently, I see that as maybe one of the
That's a
flaws
huge,
in our protocol manual.
Yeah, it's a huge flaw.
Frankly,
that we can
so.
put out proclamations that half or more than half of the council. may
Well,
not
I'm
agree
gonna
with.
stop right there. So we wouldn't have a proclamation if there wasn't at least 4 council members that wanted it initially.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Or-
perpetuating it the year over year.
Well,
or if there were at least 4 that didn't.
but that's not what I just
Four
heard.
that said we don't want it on there, it could get pulled from.
Okay.
Pulled from an
Well,
agenda.
one-
Right now, that's the
It
way.
does
that
not
it's
say
set
that.
It
up.
does.
In our current protocol manual, it says only consent agenda
Consent
items
items.
can be pulled at
Yeah.
the meeting.
But through Robert's rules, council could,
Good, that's my understanding.
by a majority vote,
Yeah.
remove an item.
Yes,
I mean,
I guess then
So there's an
where would
avenue
that
for that,
vote
just like
happen though? Because if we're not talking about it and it's getting signed and it's getting read. And then we're going over to that point, well, it's just like this last one.
Yeah,
It's a fine
Well,
example. And also with the fact that people are stating that they want lots more proclamations. I think it's worth the discussion just because,
Well, we have live briefings, Jeff, Joe, Kathy and Miguel, we all are on live briefings, and if he had 4 of us. Oh, and Sharon, so 5 of us, if he asked us, and if you want this proclamation, and we said no, at least 4 of us. Then it wouldn't be on the agenda.
okay,
yeah, we were doing our regular, we do our regular briefings, city manager would ask, this has been proposed, what do you think about it? Yeah, we debate that offline, you know what I mean, the language or whatever it needs to be, or we're not doing it at all. And then this is just a situation where it perpetuates year over year, just because we did it last year, similar to other proclamations, it's like we usually don't rescind. That hasn't happened yet, so, not that it can't, it's just happened, so. I just want to make it clear that Eric is not making the decision
No,
by himself with Mark, kind of thing, that. I wanna make-
understood, just getting a little deeper in it, because look, I recognize I'm not as involved as most of you. I'm wildly mediocre at this job. And I'm content with that, it's why I'm a 1-year rep, but it's just, it felt a little odd, just the way that it went. And, like I said, I recognize too, I didn't find it and see it, so I wasn't able to come and say my piece ahead of time. I did it in real time
Yeah.
and.
and I have had some questions from folks about introducing new proclamations and what that might look like, and if we have some sort of processes right now, to my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong. Any member of the public can forward something to the city council via the city clerk and the city manager for consideration. So like I know we've done, proclamation for Sheldon Kiwanis 100-year anniversary and different, different things throughout.
Yeah.
But just that might be something to clarify.
Yeah.
What does that process look like for new? And I understand why we have gotten in a pattern of bringing things forward, because there's nothing worse than being like, oh shoot, we should have had that on there. Because it's something that the city is recognizing on an annual basis, and a lot of times things like, Shellfish Month leading up to Oyster Fest, it's ceremonial in nature, and so maybe clarifying some of that so the public understands the process and doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
Right, let's keep it simple.
The child abuse
Mhm.
awareness
That
month.
came to me.
Yeah, came to basically all of us, and I think what we did is we forwarded it to you and said, yeah, we're supportive of this, and we'd like to do a proclamation.
Yep.
I mean, that's all I did when I got it, I was like, yeah, I read it, it seems like it aligned with our council goals, and I figured it wouldn't be controversial with anybody, and I just said, I'm good with this if you wanted to take it forward, and it sounded like you got a majority, so, or I don't know if it was you or Jennifer.
yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Sorry.
And
It's all bleeding
and
together.
as far as process, that's fine with me, as long as we have the consensus of move forward, or not move forward. We can pull the agenda items at the beginning of the meeting. The mayor asked if there's any changes to the agenda, and it could be done at that point. Certainly, we want to have that discussion in advance to make sure we don't get to that point.
Yeah.
I just say in our briefings, you ask us in our briefings, and if we don't respond, then that would be a yes. If we
And are you talking about individual briefings?
No,
Oh, okay.
the email.
Oh, okay,
With the
okay.
email. He
Understood.
knows one's coming in 2 months. He sends out a briefing. You guys interested in this? And if you email him back, say no, and 4 people say no, then it doesn't hit the agenda.
I can more specifically address the
As well.
the looking ahead
Yeah.
with
Or
that,
proclamation
with
about
that weekly.
Yeah.
So it kind of hits you a few times, so you
Sure.
guys see it and able to,
Cause you got
recognize
two
your busy
things too,
schedule.
you got procs and resolutions.
Mhm.
Yes.
Resolutions we're gonna vote on in the meeting, that's the fundamental difference, right?
Right.
Proclamation is just ceremonial thing, we're proclaiming something, putting it in writing essentially is it, and
And announcing something of importance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and resolutions could correlate to code changes or temporary
Yeah.
this is or that's, and there should be a method. A similar robust method for resolution requests as well, or even more,
Certainly.
and there should probably be a 3-touch on a resolution, or something like that as well, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it keeps that open and above board, but.
well, thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, and my intent was to place those at least. Proclamations from last year on the looking ahead in advance, so those were considered as far in advance as possible. Because I don't think that was being done, it was kind of caught up the weeks before, and so if we have the opportunity to look at those from years past. See if they need to be modified, see if they need to be adjusted, if we're missing something, it can be a discussion by the council at that point.
One item, sorry, I gotta go back to the dog pound discussion and only
Nope, that's over.
fresh in my mind still. So now that we've said we want proposals, we cannot have discussions with people about proposals.
Okay,
Because then they're non-responsive bids and they're done. Okay,
Got it. Thank you.
just want to make that clear.
I
We don't want to wreck the process. now that
No,
we-
I-
I have one more question, and Jay might be the right person to answer that. Since we don't have code enforcement in right now, who gets the stuff from the state app for like housed encampments and things like that? Where does that go right now? It goes straight to you.
Yeah, no, I'm investigating the ones that, basically triggering, right? So I mean, like, not responding to, we're resolving all of them right away, but for, the ones that I can because I have the time or because it's critical priority, yeah, I'm getting to those.
Okay.
So the unhoused encampments, like in the park, for example, is park staff usually where they get referred to PD. And we get this every single day, there's several of them. And those get referred. The other ones, parking dogs, sometimes PD can get to them, sometimes I get to them. We had an RP that was dumping their waste tank into the right of way, and I went personally dealt with that one. And came up and also threatened to tow the vehicle. So, it's
Messy yards and.
messy
Truck it.
yards,
And you
overgrown
see all
vegetation. I'm
Okay.
passing on
Yeah,
this right now.
to be triaged out.
We have somebody within a month or two that can deal with kind of the minor issues. I'm dealing with like life safety. I mean, poo on the ground is something I'm gonna go deal with immediately, somebody who's, if there's danger, if there's whatever, we'll deal with this immediately. Dangerous animals, yes, animal neglect, yes. Barking dogs, maybe. There's a complaint about some roosters I have to go deal with, stuff like that. So,
Thank you for clarifying this.
sure.
Well, I have one statement. I just want to thank the leadership, the strong leadership of this council, because this is a hard job. And that people are, we're making decisions that are affecting people's lives every day, and we've taken on that responsibility. And I want to thank you that we're nonpartisan. We talk about stuff like a family and not about what our letter is after our name, because we don't have one. Right? So we're doing what's best for the community, even if we don't disagree, even if we always disagree, and like, I might have more in common with Kathleen than I have with Joe, so I'm just saying like, it's not about party, it's about what we want to do for the city. And I want to thank you guys for being nonpartisan and for being adults and for being here and practicing
Civilized.
democracy. Thank you.
And being civilized, right?
All right. Council, item. Any more items for discussion? This is a wild night.
One more thing.
Oh.
It's quick, we were talking about the dog pound and it would be nice to do a proclamation a dog pound group or something like that.
You brought it up, Kathy.
I just thought it was in the back of my mind. and-
Should recognize the volunteers.
Yeah, recognize the volunteers.
Oh,
for
and
that.
since we're online, congrats to all the grads, 2023, okay.
Clapping.
Kindergarten graduation, no clapping.
All right.
I still like to do some investigate some porta potties for town. And I think I already told you the company that I talked to a few months back.
Where do you want them?
I think we need one by the park. I think we need one maybe by the square where they pee in the bushes. We're gonna be eating lunch there tomorrow.
You're a little late on the porta potty then.
But, I'd like to see if there's a way we can get a couple porta potties in town so people don't use the streets and the alleys. But that's just me. I know we've tried it once or twice, but it's been quite some time.
Jeff and I were together as a group this year, there's
Yeah.
recent data on.
And that was SPAT that did those last ones, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the old
Through-
saying
through-
is,
through-
not in my,
Through
name."
funding,
yeah,
the general fund.
they're not cheap either.
No.
I think they were $100 a month, the place I called, and they were $90, $10 was the insurance on them, and if they get destroyed, that $10 replaces it a month, so they were $100 a month.
That's what I pay.
I'll pay for a year for one,
All right. You heard from the
you
mayor.
know, Bridget check. All right, no other items? Study session is adjourned at 27 p.m.
Better lunch.